Hello and welcome to the Clear Voice, brought to you by Clear Career Professionals. I'm your host, James Groom. Today, I'm joined by Associate VP of Clear, James Hopper. James, it's good to have you on the show, and it's another James and James show.
Yes, it is. We have a great topic today, and I think I'm really looking forward to diving into this.
Yeah, I am as well. Today, we're joined by someone whose work sits right at the intersection of neuroscience, leadership, and purpose. When we talk about developing clear, more intentional thinking, especially in how we lead organizations and people, our guest today has built an entire philosophy around it. Dr. Don Hooper is a lifelong educator and leadership expert who has dedicated his career to helping others think and lead with purpose. He serves as president and CEO of the Center for Quality Leadership and executive director of the School Research Nexus, helping organizations and individuals reach their highest potential. A former school superintendent and university professor, Dr. Hooper has guided educational and organizational leaders across the country in developing clearer, more intentional thinking. He blends neuroscience, leadership, and personal growth to teach what he calls power thinking, a practical approach to transforming how we solve problems, make decisions, and live with clarity. Welcome to the show, Dr. Hooper, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you, James. It's my pleasure to be here.
You've got an impressive bio. I had to cut it down just for the airtime, but tell us a little bit about your leadership journey and anything that we missed.
Well, I don't know. When you're old, there's a lot to say, and people may not want to hear any of it. But I still remember as an educator, I had a great fifth grade teacher, and I finished some of the work early, and she had me assist, other students in the classroom. And I guess that's when I felt like education was my calling. So I went through that, got a scholarship when I graduated from high school as the most promising boy future teacher. Wasn't a big scholarship, but, it was a recognition that helped some. And, of course, the cost of universities back then was different than the cost it is now. So I was able to work my way through there. I actually started teaching without a degree. My major was mathematics. I was going to be a PhD in math and a college professor, but the shortage of math teachers, I got invited to start teaching without a degree because most of my hours were in mathematics. So in a 7-period day, I taught the last 5 periods, and every morning would drive over to West Texas State, now West Texas A&M University, and take an 8 o'clock class, drive back, teach 5 periods, the last 5 periods of the day, and 3 nights a week go back to finish up the degree. So I did finish it that next summer. Then got invited into administration. I was a slide rule number sense coach. Not many people know what a slide rule is today, but that was back in the day. Number sense is still a thing, and just got into administration. And while I was assistant high school principal, was told that you really need to be a superintendent. So at age 28, I became the youngest one in the state at that time. And a little small rural district, only had 110 kids, K through 12, finished up after 25 years as superintendent at Fort Bend ISD with 60,000 students at the time. So, quite a journey there. Met a lot of interesting leaders along the way, got to meet them in person, and I talk about them some in my book. So Debbie Clement Stone is an individual that I met in person and got a personal autograph from him. W. Edwards Deming is another one. Many along the way, problem solvers, James Akoff and Peter Singay, and just a whole host. So it kind of made my career journey a lot about learning from the best minds out there and the best people to solve problems out there. So that's what gave me the inspiration. And then it came to me years ago, write a book and call it Power Thinking for Success. But as I ran that by a few people, they said, well, success is great, but it's one of those words that's, kind of overused. So you need to do a little deeper thinking. And that's when it occurred to me to title the book Power Thinking, Discover the Unknown by Unlocking Your Brain. And so learn to think for yourself and to innovate, not to be indoctrinated. And that's where I think education should be today, is teaching people how to own their own mind and how to think for themselves so that they can be the best in their chosen field.
Well, I'm not in education. That's not my career path, but you talk about educational teacher shortages all the way back to the slide rule days, and I know they're going on today. Was there ever been a time where we haven't had a shortage of teachers?
I can't remember one. Perhaps James Hopper does, but he was also superintendent for many years. And even today, there's a shortage. Although I must say, we've done our part. We had 5 children, and our son and 4 daughters. Our son's wife is a teacher. Our 4 daughters went into education. I now have grandchildren going into education. So we're doing our part, James, to fill the pipeline.
We appreciate your service.
Well, I think you're exactly right. I don't think we've ever had more teachers than we've had students. It's a very difficult time right now to fill those roles, but it's still a very rewarding career. And you've had an illustrious career, and you've done a great job of explaining power thinking. You know, as a former athletics coach, power to us in athletics and sports was the combination of strength and speed. And I think that you sort of bring that out in your book as well, and addressing it with neuroscience. So can you tell us, what should we understand about how our brains influence our decision making?
Well, for one thing, I think a lot of people don't understand that they have this power. You know, they're limited in the coursework that they take, or depending on their socioeconomic condition they come from, which, by the way, socioeconomics is the single biggest predictor of success. So whenever you come from a home where both parents are really trying to struggle and have to work hard and don't get to spend time with you and encourage you to think and to learn and to grow, or you come from a home where there's plenty of assets around and you're got every kind of gadget and you're put in all kind of tutorial programs and things like that, it just gives you ahead of the game. But I think that regardless of your income status, you know, I don't know everyone's story. I was raised up on a dirt road, 6 kids, and you know, we could hardly pay attention, much less pay a bill. But that didn't mean we didn't have an opportunity in a small town in Texas to get a quality education and to be inspired by teachers to learn and to grow and to think. So as I went through that process, and then I finally understood, if you look at the prologue of the book of some of the great minds that are out there, what's the difference in ordinary people and those people? People like Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Plato, Socrates, Harriet Tubman, Katherine Johnson, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Oprah Winfrey, Warren Buffett, Grant Cardone. I mean, some of them came from humble beginnings as well. So why is it that they were able to succeed in very powerful ways? And it goes back to the Sir Isaac Newton story of the discovery of gravity and the introduction to calculus. And that is, he became very obsessive about thinking about what he was observing and giving thought to that, rather than just being in some echo chamber. And finally, he had enough courage to tell his peers, there is a law of gravity. And so he observed it, he obsessed about it, and he created it. So that's what people have the ability to do today. And we see many innovators out there. We could go on and on about it, but learning how to take that power, that God-given power that each person has, in fact, the one and only one thing that each of us has under our control is our thoughts. So when you learn to control your thoughts and use the power of your mind, you'll open up amazing opportunities.
Well, when we're talking about controlling your thoughts and our goal is to think more powerfully, can you give some of our leaders that listen to this show some practical ways in which they can train their brain to do that?
Well, you know, patience really is power under control, and self-control is a result of thought control. So if we're going to be patient, if we're going to, you know, exercise things like love and joy and peace, and then patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control, we have to understand how to exercise our thoughts. And so don't let other people put thoughts into your mind and you just automatically accept it. You know, you have to do some thinking about it. You have to do some research about it and determine what the truth is, because the truth is what's ultimately going to set you free.
That's probably really good advice now with social media and anybody being able to post and elevate all kinds of thoughts, some of which are good and true and some of which are not.
Somebody wrote in a book long ago that you transform yourself by the renewing of your mind. It may have been the same one that you were sort of referencing there, Dr. Hooper. So, with that in mind, how is it that we can train our brains to think more powerfully? What can we do?
Well, first of all, you have to determine what you want to think about. And see, there's a quote in the book, too, that says 5% of the population are thinkers, 10% think they're thinkers, and the other 85% would rather die than think. And I was sharing that with a granddaughter, and she said, but granddaddy, 50% think they're in the top 5%.
Agreed.
So you really do have to exercise a disciplined approach. So you were talking about athletics and the power and the speed there. So part of power of thinking is exercising selective thought and controlling those thoughts, because that's the only way you get self-control. And because self-control is the result of thought control. So you can think a lot of things, you can analyze them, you can use critical thinking skills, creative thinking skills and combination. But at the end of the day, you are in control of your thoughts, and you're the one that has to select what thoughts come in and what thoughts are pushed away.
I've seen research that showed that self-regulation is the single most influential characteristic in all of success. So that's sort of what you're referencing there, isn't it?
It is. And I think what many leaders that are true good leaders understand is that self-regulation, because when they're conducting themselves as they should, that's going to be an inspiration to others to do the exact same thing rather than pushing a particular agenda. I learned I was an Eagle Scout. My three brothers are Eagle Scouts. My son's an Eagle Scout. I've got two Eagle Scout grandsons. So I'm telling you that story to say this. I learned whenever I went to Philmont Scout Ranch that it's what you do as a leader that determines who the leader really is. If you're willing to get your hands dirty, jump in there and work side by side with people without trying to push something off on somebody else, they're going to see that as a servant leader. And that's where the greatest influence comes in.
Well, throughout our careers, I'm sure we've all seen people approach problems in a different way. We've all seen the person that struggles with analysis paralysis, a lot of data coming in, but not being able to fully commit to a answer because, the news set of data shows up or something like that. What recommendation do you have for people approaching complex challenges so they don't get stuck?
Sure. Well, you mentioned the word data. So you've heard it said a data-driven decision. Nothing could be further from the truth. I think the reason that has become a common phrase is because of alliteration, the two Ds, data and driven and decision, the three Ds there. But the truth of the matter is data is only a point. When you link data together, it possibly could become information. Information that's verified might become knowledge, and knowledge that's exercised could generate understanding. Once you have those, that's the open door to wisdom. So data is the lowest point on the totem pole. Wisdom is where we should be. So it's fine to take in all those data points, but you have to use these thinking skills, use power thinking in order to find out, is data truly good information that might become knowledge, which could lead to understanding, which ultimately would lead to wisdom. And it's the wisdom that wins every time.
Okay, so you've just flipped this whole concept on its ear then, because we've been talking about data-driven decision-making for some time. And so now we've got to come at it from a whole different direction. So I'm going to ask the age-old question then. If I'm supposed to use wisdom, where in the heck am I supposed to find it?
Well, it begins by turning to what you find is truth, because from truth, that's going to set you free. So keep in mind, data-driven is an alliteration, but data-enhanced decision-making is where the wisdom is. So you use data to enhance your thoughts and your abilities. So data-enhanced decision-making rather than data-driven, because data, like we said, is the lowest point on the totem pole. But data can lead to wisdom.
I think that's a great point to make. I've always said that data will never give us our answers. But if you know how to look for it, it will lead you to ask questions. And if you know how to ask the right questions, that's going to give you, like your wisdom, like you said, data enhanced.
Yeah, powerful questions lead to powerful thoughts, which lead to powerful discoveries. Well, you need good questions, because questions, if you ask a question, what happened to your mind? You felt it right then, didn't you? You started thinking.
Right, right. Well, let me ask you this. You talk a lot about purpose in your book.
Yes.
How does discovering one's purpose enhance their thinking?
Well, you can only live purpose. You can never finish your purpose. So, you should, once you discover your purpose, live with purpose on purpose. Now, I know that's a lot of using up the word purpose, but why in the world would you do anything that you don't know the why? You see, the purpose is the big why. You have to understand what the big why is. And once you understand the why, then you can determine if it's truthful. And if it's truthful, something that you may wish to do. If it's really not truthful, then somebody is trying to deceive, distort, divide, and destroy. We all know who's behind that, don't we? It's a D word. It's called the devil.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that probably took too long to learn in my life was that, I can only control my actions. I can't control other people's actions. And of course, you said I control my thoughts as well. What are some of these warning signs when my actions, I want them to be a certain way and my thoughts aren't aligning necessarily with that purpose? How can I recognize that? And then what can I do to fix it?
Well, I think in many cases, we're very quick to respond. So back when I mentioned there are 9 different things there that are very powerful, love is universal, being happy and joyful, and the peace, that inner peace that we feel. The next part of that is patience. Now, that's not the ability to control, but that's how we act while we're controlling. So the more that we can learn to listen and think before we respond, and that's so difficult because we live in a world where everybody just wants you to hit that button quickly. But we have to learn, what is our patience factor? How am I being patient? Am I being patient enough? Am I being patient at all? Then that's where that kindness comes in there. We have to remember to be kind and goodness. Then we can be faithful and gentle and that tough one of self-control. But there's those 9 things that are so important in everyday life and in accomplishing a purpose-filled life.
Well, that sounds like wisdom in and of itself. Every time I go to a conference, Dr. Hooper, an education conference or even other types, the term thought leader gets tossed out with reckless abandon. What is it that makes someone a true thought leader in your estimation?
Well, I think that the thought leaders are individuals who spend the time and the mental discipline to dig deep into a subject. Instead of being a mile wide and an inch deep, there may be an inch wide and a mile deep as an alliteration there. Not literally that way, but, just thinking about it. Back to some of the other thought leaders that we mentioned in the past. They learned to obsess over it. Now, it takes time. You have to think about things over time and spend time thinking about them. And the more time that you spend on that, the deeper understanding that you have, because you're looking at that data, you're thinking about it, you're piecing it together. Is this information this useful? Is it something that you can put into effect with knowledge and therefore have that deeper understanding, and you develop that wisdom? Now you can share that with other people who haven't had the time or may not even have the resources to do that deep thought. And so as a thought leader, you're sharing that, you are saving them time, and you are giving them some wisdom based upon your effort to find those deep thoughts.
So a thought leader at one point be a mentor, giving ideas and thoughts, but also perhaps being a coach and leading that person to find their own answers.
You're exactly correct, James. Every one of us need coaching. Every one of us need mentors. And there's always mentors out there, and it can come from different sources. It might not always be an older person. It might be a younger person who says something that just grabs your attention and takes your mind back to where it could be and should be. Those mentoring, those coaching, and what I found with coaching is that it's more of asking a question than telling a person what to do. Because again, when you ask the question, people have to think, and then they have to come up with a thought. Then they have to decide, am I going to put forth the effort to accomplish what I see, what I want? It starts with the heart.
So, for our listeners who are recognizing that they might be missing out on some of this that you're talking about, what are some simple daily practices or exercises they can use to strengthen their thinking and decision making?
Well, I think we have to, we've got digital devices. Sometimes we need a digital detox in a way, but the sharpest memory doesn't have as good a memory as a dull pencil and a piece of paper. So once we come to that conclusion, we need to write it down. Now, we could use our iPhone to put in the notes section a daily reminder of something that you want to do. Or you could use pencil and paper. You could use the planners. There's so many out there. I've got a workbook that's for certified thought leaders to become power thinking and use it that I make available to people. Also a thought leader journal. But the point is this, in answer to your question, James, that's write it down rather than just think you're going to remember it, because everything comes into your life. And the only way you can get back is go back to that written roadmap or that digital roadmap where you have captured that. And the more times that it goes through your mind, you create a new neural pathway for that to get there quickly. And this is what people may not understand about brain plasticity, is the neural pathways, and the way that they're made strong is with regular, consistent, constant use.
You talk about memory, and that's one of the things. It hurt my feelings in the book because, in addition to write it down, as I get older, I realize that my memory is not doing as well, so I do have to take those notes. But in the book, one of the things cited is that you need to do more physical exercise, and so I realize that I'm not doing enough exercise if my memory's fading, I guess.
Well, this body's just housing the brain, right? So in our current physical state, we were created with a mind, a heart, a body, and a soul. And it's currently in this physical body. And that mind is currently operating in the brain. But as we age, things begin to diminish over time. Now, it's been scientifically proven that brain plasticity lasts throughout our life, even if you're 100 years old. Again, back to the frequency of use on that. So we can create those neural pathways, but we have to also take care of the body as it ages. And you don't understand that as well when you're young as you do when you get into the 7th and 8th and 9th decades of life. So you have to take care of what's housing the mind and the body and the brain. That doesn't mean that you just had to be an athlete all the time, but using good sense, good judgment, and making sure that you don't go overboard on anything, because you can go too far with physical exercise. You can go too far with no exercise. You can go too far with eating too much. Not that you can't enjoy everything, but there's a lot out there, and I'm seeing more of it today than I've seen in the past.
While you're talking about neuroplasticity, have you been following, they're doing a lot of research. Obviously, we work with police officers a lot and military veterans who come into a lot of times law enforcement and fire departments and city government in general. Of course, one of the ever prevalent problems is PTSD. There's a lot of research going on right now with psychedelics, and one of the things that they're citing is it rapidly induces neuroplasticity. It lets you kind of, I don't know, you may have a better way to explain it. Basically, allow some of these people with PTSD to kind of get out of the rut of their thoughts that have triggered this PTSD. Have you been following any of that research? Do you know anything about that?
A little bit I have. I've never been on any kind of a drug or psychedelic or anything like that. Not to say that it isn't useful or helpful, but I think what's happening there with the PTSD is that stress. And it's very hard to release in your mind what happened, and that comes back frequently. I know I was in the armed services during the Vietnam War, never had to go to Vietnam, but I had veteran friends that came back and then would wake up in the middle of the night, screaming with a dream because of the things that they saw. So it so deeply impacts their thoughts that it's very hard to release that. So those new therapies can help. I think that's beginning to be the research that's out there. But the key thing is learning how to let go of things we should let go and not harbor those, create new neural pathways. So I'm not a PTSD specialist in any particular way, but the thing that's causing a lot of that is they're going down those old neural pathways. So we have to create new neural pathways. And if this helps them get to a point that they can relax on that, So sometimes, people say you shouldn't have more than two if you're a man, or one if you're a woman, drink a day. But sometimes that does relax an individual. So maybe this new research with those types of approaches helps them to relax and create that new neural pathway. I hope it does, because PTSD is something no one wants.
I think it's a great thing to bring up about how can we sort of renew our minds. We have such an abundance today of literature out there about leadership. And yet at the same time, we see so many people making decisions. And sometimes we sit back and say, gosh, that was such a critically bad decision. How in the world did they come up with that? Well, so what I wanted to ask you is what are some of the most common mental barriers that people face?
Well, power thinking and leadership goes back to, we were both superintendents. So may I use that as an example? It may be applicable to others. But one time I had a curriculum audit. And yes, I had a PhD in leadership and management, so I knew all the management theory in that. But I was reminded when he looked at the organizational chart that there is line and there is staff. So if you didn't have students, you wouldn't need teachers. If you didn't have teachers and students, you wouldn't need administrators. If you didn't have them, then you wouldn't need a superintendent. You wouldn't need a board. But then everyone else is the support system. The HR is a processor, not meaning to hurt their feelings, but they're not decision makers. The decision makers are in the line. The staff is support. Now, we need both. Once people kind of understand that, then I created an executive steering team. So in the executive steering team, I didn't just have the traditional org chart. I brought people in from every level into a meeting, regardless of the org chart, and listened to their voices. Because sometimes a custodian sees things, thinks about things, and can offer insight into things that nobody else would see. So you have to visit with people at all levels, and that's one of the things I tried to do. And then with that, then we would get into our strategies and our techniques, and the actually using good systems, because the system will win every time. So the first role of leadership is to create a winning system for people.
Yes, sir. So it's almost like you have to be vulnerable. You have to be strong enough to be vulnerable, then to bring in those other perspectives and ideas by listening to your people.
You have to listen to them and keep that ego pushed aside. Pride is one of the big downfalls of anyone everywhere. We do not need to be prideful, but we do need to be humble, and we need to listen, and then we need to have courage to step out, take the risk, and lead. But do it after listening to a lot of people, a lot of voices. And then even then, as you go along, continue to listen.
Thank you.
I think that's great advice. I know I can spend all time thinking about what the solution to a problem is, but a lot of the problems exist in that front line. So if you're not talking to those people and finding out from their perspective what the issue is and maybe some of the solutions, is difficult. And you mentioned ego, and I can definitely see that, because I've definitely had my feelings hurt by talking to those line level people, even though I have to. Any advice for keeping your ego in check?
Well, there's actually egoism, which is very healthy and good, and there's egotism, which is very prideful and narcissistic. So don't be egotistical, but have your egoism, meaning you're not afraid to interact with people, and then you're not afraid to lead when the chance is there, when the opportunity is there, and when the need is there, but you do so with a servant leadership mindset rather than that prideful, egotistical mindset.
Well, moving right along, then, I think it's incredibly valuable information. We mentioned before, schools use this thinking, so do municipalities, basically any type of leadership position. But how can organizations or schools integrate these ideas from your book into their culture?
Well, culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. That's a quote. I forget who exactly said it. But the culture is kind of made up of rituals, rewards, totems, and taboos. That's the four pillar corners there. So a ritual is a daily routine. And we talked about how routine creates a pathway, a mental neural pathway. So if you're a new leader coming in and you want to make a change in the system, you have to change the daily routines. of things. Now, not that you're knocking out the totems of the past and you're not stepping into the taboos of the past. When I went to a new school system, I would sit down with every principal and I'd say, tell me something that you want me to know about you. And then tell me something that you think the superintendent should hear about the district. Maybe that you've seen, nobody else has seen, or they're not listening to. And then the next thing I said, where is the quicksand? I don't want to step in the quicksand. And I did that with every one of them. So that's building culture because you're still understanding the totems, the things that they hold in value. You're understanding the taboos. That's that quicksand that's there. You're working on creating new routines, but in that process, by giving recognition to success as people come along the way, you're creating new totems. So whenever you have that culture in place, that culture is going to survive. And then you are able to create those systems for success, but you're doing it jointly with all of them. You can't just come in and start commanding things. You have to listen first, and then you have to share, and then you have to work together and use creative thinking as well as critical thinking to generate the right ideas to move forward.
Dr. Hooper, your book, as you mentioned, is entitled Power Thinking, Discovering the Unknown by Unlocking Your Brain. It's on Amazon in paperback. I got it in the Kindle version, and there's even an Audible version for those people on the go who get to listen to you read it to them, I guess. Can you tell us, beyond the book, is there anything, if people want to know more about you, is there a way for them to connect with you, and what's the best way for them to reach you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so they can find me on LinkedIn and reach out, send a message. We'll talk. Always open for new ideas and new connections with people. That's one way to do it. CQL.net, the Center for Quality Leadership. By the way, the way I came up with that was I was going through all of the systems thinking tools and good learning from the past. W. Edwards Deming, who is known for total quality management. I met him personally, got his autograph. So did I meet Joseph Duran, Russell Akoff, just a whole host of different people there. Both of them told me, Deming and Duran said, the 20th century is going to be the quality century. And that's where I decided to come up with the Center for Quality Leadership. And so that CQL.net is how you could access my website. And we'll change those things over time, but certainly LinkedIn or that. Happy to interact with people and learn from them.
Great. Do you have any advice for young or aspiring leaders that we haven't already covered? Anything to leave them with?
Don't be afraid to lead. Leadership is really influence, and you can influence a lot of people in a lot of different ways. We never know when we're influencing someone, either for the good or for the bad. But become the best person that you can become. Make sure that your thinking is wholesome, that it's useful, that it's constructive, that you're following a pathway with purpose, on purpose, discovering your true purpose in life, not letting someone else fill you up with the wrong indoctrination thoughts. They want to infiltrate so they can indoctrinate, but you find truth, and you have to look for it. And when you look for it and you obsess about it, you'll find it, and that'll set you free. That's whenever you can begin to use your mind in strong and powerful ways. But once you do that and you live it, people are going to see that in action. That's where the influence comes in, and that's when they invite you into leadership.
Those are great words for young leaders. I got a copy of the book, and it's been a very good read. Some humbling information in there, but definitely good information. James, do you have any final thoughts before we close out?
I think it's an incredibly inspiring book, and like I said, I've got my copy as well. I need to get it to Dr. Hooper so I can get it autographed. But anyway, thank you so much for putting this together, and I'm glad that you did. There's nothing better than having somebody of your stature and in our industry that can also come up with concepts that can also bleed into not only education, but in any leadership role. So once again, I appreciate your putting this thing together so that we can all understand how to think more powerfully. Thank you, Dr. Hooper.
Thank you, James, and James Groom as well. It's been an honor and a privilege to be with you guys today, and thank you for all your kind words.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm not sure how you're going to sign my Kindle copy, but I may have to go out and get the physical book too.
Well, you can always buy it, ship it to me. I'll sign it, ship it back. Making a joke, of course.
I'll take care of it. Well, James, thank you for joining us today, and thanks for bringing us this topic. Dr. Hooper, we appreciate your time and the insight you shared today. Encourage everybody to go out and get that book and learn some valuable information. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in today, and please follow Clear Career Professionals on LinkedIn. Check out our website for leadership positions, and also continue to tune in for these future episodes of The Clear Voice. And we'll catch you next time.